Here's something that'll blow your mind. The dumbest thing about stupid people isn't that they're stupid, it's that they have no idea they're stupid. In fact, they often think they're smarter than everyone else. Sound crazy, right? But there's actual science behind this, and it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And here's the uncomfortable part. It's not just happening to those people out there. It's probably happening to you right now in at least one area of your life, and you don't even know it. Look, I get it. Nobody wants to believe they're walking around with unjustified confidence, making decisions based on knowledge they don't actually have. But that's exactly what makes this cognitive bias so dangerous and so fascinating. It's like a mental blind spot that prevents you from seeing your own incompetence. The less you know about something, the more confident you feel about it. And in today's world, where everyone's got an opinion on everything and social media rewards loud confidence over quiet expertise, this isn't just some quirky psychological phenomenon. It's literally reshaping how we think, how we work, and how we interact with each other. Now, before you click away thinking this doesn't apply to me, let me challenge you with this. By the end of this video, you're going to discover exactly where in your life you're fooling yourself right now. I'm going to show you the 4 stages everyone goes through from ignorance to mastery, reveal why social media has turned this effect into a cultural epidemic, and give you practical tools to build genuine competence instead of fake confidence. But here's the catch. You got to stick around until the end, because the most important part, the part about recognizing when you're on what experts call Mount Stupid, that's coming last. Miss it, and you'll walk away still blind to your own blind spots. And hey, if this kind of deep, no BS philosophical content is your thing, do me a solid. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It tells YouTube to show this to more people who actually want to think critically instead of just scrolling mindlessly. We're building a community here of people who'd rather face uncomfortable truths than comfortable lies. So let's dive in and figure out how your brain might be lying to you right now. Let me ask you something that might sting a little. Have you ever noticed how the people who know the least about a subject tend to be the most confident when talking about it? I'm talking about that guy at the party who just read one article about cryptocurrency and suddenly thinks he's Warren Buffett. Or that friend who watched a couple of YouTube videos and now believes they understand quantum physics better than actual physicists. This isn't just annoying. It's a cognitive bias so powerful that it shapes how millions of people make decisions every single day. The Dunning-Kruger effect reveals something uncomfortable about human nature. Our brains are wired to trick us into thinking we're more capable than we actually are, especially when we're just starting to learn something new. Here's where it gets really interesting. Back in 1999, 2 psychologists named David Dunning and Justin Kruger studied this phenomenon and discovered something mind-blowing. They found that people who scored in the bottom quartile on tests of logic, grammar, and humor consistently overestimated their performance. We're not talking about a small margin of error here. These folks thought they performed above average when they'd actually bombed. But here's the kicker. The same lack of competence that made them fail also prevented them from recognizing their failure. It's like being blind to your own blindness. You can't see what you don't know because you don't know enough to see it. This creates a dangerous feedback loop where incompetence breeds confidence, and that confidence reinforces incompetence. Think about the last time you started learning something completely new, maybe a musical instrument, a new language, or a complex skill at work. Remember those first few weeks when everything felt exciting and you thought, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect working its magic on you. In those early stages, you haven't yet learned enough to understand how much you don't know. It's like standing at the base of a mountain in thick fog. You can only see a few feet ahead, so you assume the summit must be just around the corner. The reality? You haven't even started the real climb yet. This initial burst of overconfidence isn't necessarily bad. It can motivate you to keep going. But it becomes problematic when you mistake this beginner's enthusiasm for actual expertise. The really cruel part about this cognitive bias is that it doesn't just affect stupid people. It affects all of us in different areas of our lives. You might be genuinely skilled in your profession, but fall victim to the Dunning-Kruger effect when you venture into unfamiliar territory. A brilliant engineer might become an overconfident amateur when discussing psychology. A talented artist might display shocking ignorance about financial matters while speaking with absolute certainty. The effect doesn't discriminate based on intelligence. It shows up wherever your self-awareness takes a vacation. And in today's world, where everyone's got a platform to broadcast their half-baked opinions to millions, this isn't just a personal problem anymore. It's become a cultural epidemic that's reshaping how we think about expertise itself. Now, if you want to understand how the Dunning-Kruger effect actually operates in your life, you need to know about the 4 stages of competence. This framework is like a roadmap that shows exactly where you are on your journey from total ignorance to genuine mastery. Stage 1 is called unconscious incompetence, and it's where most people live most of the time without even knowing it. At this stage, you don't know what you don't know. You're bad at something, but you're blissfully unaware of just how bad you are. This is the sweet spot for overconfidence. You haven't learned enough to realize how complex the subject really is. It's like a teenager who just got their driver's license and thinks they're basically a professional race car driver because they can parallel park without hitting the curb. The transition from stage 1 to stage 2 is usually painful, and that's actually a good sign. Stage 2 is conscious incompetence. This is where you suddenly realize, holy crap, I don't know anything. This moment of awakening often feels like a punch to the gut. Your confidence plummets because you're finally starting to see the full scope of what you're trying to learn. A lot of people quit at this stage because the gap between where they are and where they want to be seems insurmountable. But here's what you need to understand. Reaching this stage means you're actually making progress. You've climbed high enough up the mountain to see how much higher it goes. This is where humility becomes your greatest asset, not your weakness. The people who embrace this uncomfortable awareness are the ones who eventually become truly competent. Stage 3 is conscious competence, and this is where real skill starts to develop. You can do the thing, but it requires focus, effort, and deliberate attention. A musician at this stage can play a complex piece, but they need to concentrate on every note. A public speaker can deliver an engaging presentation, but they're acutely aware of their techniques and strategies. This stage requires patience because everything still feels like work. You're competent, sure, but it's not effortless yet. The good news? You're past the Dunning-Kruger danger zone. You know enough to recognize your limitations, and you're skilled enough to keep improving. Most people who reach this level and stick with it eventually experience something magical. The work starts to feel natural. That brings us to stage 4, unconscious competence. This is mastery, when your skills become so deeply ingrained that you don't have to think about them anymore. It's the jazz musician who improvises without conscious thought, the surgeon whose hands seem to move on their own, the writer whose words flow effortlessly onto the page. But here's an interesting twist. Some experts at this stage can actually loop back and experience a mild form of Dunning-Kruger again. Because they've internalized their skills so completely, they sometimes forget how difficult those skills actually are for beginners. They'll say things like, "It's simple, just do this," not realizing they're skipping over years of accumulated knowledge. True wisdom means recognizing that you've reached this level while maintaining enough metacognition to remember the journey that got you here. Let me tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. Social media has turned the Dunning-Kruger effect into a pandemic of epic proportions. We're living in an era where anyone with a smartphone can become an instant expert on literally anything. Scroll through Twitter for 5 minutes, and you'll find people with zero medical training confidently diagnosing complex health conditions. Armchair economists solving global financial crises with 280 characters, and self-proclaimed relationship gurus who've never had a successful long-term relationship themselves. The problem isn't just that these people exist. Overconfident fools have always been around. The problem is that platforms are specifically designed to amplify their voices. The algorithm doesn't care about accuracy or expertise. It cares about engagement. And guess what gets more engagement than careful, nuanced analysis? Loud, confident, and simple answers to complex problems. Here's where it gets really insidious. Social media creates what I call knowledge shortcuts. The illusion that reading a few threads or watching a couple of TikTok videos makes you knowledgeable about a subject. You watch a 10-minute documentary about World War II, and suddenly you're ready to argue with historians. You read a Malcolm Gladwell article about psychology, and now you think you understand human behavior better than trained therapists. This isn't learning. It's intellectual fast food. It gives you the temporary satisfaction of feeling informed without the actual nutritional value of deep understanding. The worst part, the platforms reward this behavior. Post a nuanced take that acknowledges complexity and uncertainty, and you'll get maybe a dozen likes. Post a confident, controversial hot take that oversimplifies everything, and you'll go viral. The Dunning-Kruger effect thrives in this environment because social media strips away all the natural checks and balances that used to keep overconfidence in check. In the past, if you want to share your opinions about complex topics, you do in person, at a dinner party, in a classroom, at a community meeting. In those settings, people could challenge you, ask follow-up questions, and push back on your ideas. You'd get immediate feedback that would help calibrate your confidence to your actual competence. But online, you can curate your audience, block anyone who disagrees, and surround yourself with an echo chamber that constantly validates your half-baked ideas. You never have to face the uncomfortable realization that you might be wrong because you've built a digital fortress that keeps reality at bay. What makes this particularly dangerous is that it's creating a generation of people who can't distinguish between genuine expertise and performative confidence. We've started to believe that whoever speaks the loudest and most confidently must know what they're talking about. Real experts, the ones who've spent decades studying their fields, often speak with caution, nuance, and uncertainty because they understand the complexity of what they're discussing. But in the court of public opinion, that humility reads as weakness. Meanwhile, the confident, incompetent person who just learned about the topic yesterday speaks in absolutes and certainties, and we mistake that confidence for authority. This is how we end up with a world where people trust influencers more than scientists, where viral misinformation spreads faster than truth, and where the Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just a personal cognitive bias. It's become a defining feature of our entire information ecosystem. You know what's wild? The ancient Greeks figured out the antidote to the Dunning-Kruger effect about 2,400 years before Dunning and Kruger were even born. Socrates, one of the most brilliant minds in human history, walked around Athens saying, "I know that I know nothing," and he meant it. This wasn't false modesty or some clever philosophical trick. Socrates genuinely understood something that most people today still haven't grasped. True wisdom begins with recognizing the limits of your own knowledge. The oracle at Delphi declared him the wisest man in Athens, and when Socrates heard this, he was genuinely confused. He didn't feel wise, so he went around questioning people who were supposed to be experts, politicians, poets, craftsmen, and discovered something fascinating. These people thought they knew a lot more than they actually did, while Socrates at least knew what he didn't know. That self-awareness, that intellectual humility, was what made him truly wise. This concept, what philosophers call Socratic ignorance, is the most powerful weapon you have against cognitive bias and overconfidence. It's not about doubting everything or becoming paralyzed by uncertainty. It's about maintaining a healthy skepticism toward your own beliefs and being willing to say, "I don't know," without feeling like it diminishes you. Think about how rare that is in today's world. When was the last time you heard someone in a position of authority simply admit they don't have all the answers? We've been conditioned to believe that admitting ignorance is a sign of weakness, when actually it's the opposite. It takes real strength and real wisdom to stand in front of people and say, "This is beyond my expertise." The people who can't do that, the ones who always have an answer even when they shouldn't, those are the ones trapped in the Dunning-Kruger cycle. Here's the practical application of Socratic wisdom. Before you form a strong opinion about something, ask yourself what you actually know and what you've merely assumed. If someone challenges your beliefs, don't get defensive, get curious. The Socratic method wasn't about winning arguments. It was about getting closer to truth through questioning. When Socrates engaged with someone, he'd ask probing questions that would gradually reveal the gaps and contradictions in their thinking. He didn't do this to humiliate them. He did it to help them see their own ignorance, so they could move toward genuine understanding. You can apply this same technique to yourself. Before you post that confident take on social media, spend 5 minutes playing devil's advocate with your own position. What evidence would disprove your belief? What assumptions are you making? What do you know about this topic? This kind of self-interrogation is uncomfortable, but it's the only way to develop real metacognition. The beautiful irony of Socratic ignorance is that once you truly embrace it, you become less susceptible to manipulation and more capable of actual learning. People who think they already know everything can't learn anything new. Their cup is already full. But when you approach the world with genuine intellectual humility, you create space for new information, better arguments, and deeper understanding. You stop needing to be right all the time and start focusing on getting it right. This shift, from defending your ego to pursuing truth, is transformative. It doesn't mean you become wishy-washy or never take a stand on anything. It means you hold your beliefs with open hands instead of clenched fists. You're willing to change your mind when presented with better evidence. And paradoxically, this makes you more confident in the long run because your beliefs are based on solid ground rather than wishful thinking and ego protection. Let's get brutally honest about something. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just an amusing quirk of human psychology. It ruins lives, destroys careers, and sometimes gets people killed. I'm not being dramatic here. Think about the engineer who's convinced they understand structural dynamics after a few YouTube tutorials and decides to renovate their house without consulting actual experts. Or the amateur investor who reads a few articles about day trading and loses their entire retirement savings because they were too confident to seek professional advice. These aren't hypothetical scenarios. This stuff happens every single day. The gap between what you think you can do and what you can actually do becomes a minefield when real stakes are involved. Overconfidence doesn't just make you look foolish. It can have devastating consequences for you and everyone around you. In the workplace, the Dunning-Kruger effect creates some of the most toxic dynamics you'll ever encounter. We've all worked with that person who got promoted beyond their competence, someone who talks a great game in meetings but can't actually execute when it matters. They volunteer for projects they're not qualified for. They dismiss the concerns of more experienced colleagues. And they make decisions with a level of certainty that's completely unjustified by their actual knowledge. The damage this causes isn't just about one person's failures. It demoralizes the entire team. The truly competent people on your team, the ones who understand the complexity of the work, watch as the overconfident, incompetent person gets recognition and rewards. This creates what I call competence inversion, where organizations inadvertently punish expertise and reward confident ignorance. Over time, this drives the best people away and creates a culture where appearance matters more than substance. Relationships are another area where the Dunning-Kruger effect wreaks absolute havoc. I'm talking about people who think they're great communicators when they actually dominate every conversation. People who believe they're emotionally intelligent when they can't read a room to save their lives. People who think they're excellent partners when their relationships consistently fail for the same reasons. The inability to accurately assess your interpersonal skills creates a vicious cycle. You don't think you need to improve, so you don't work on yourself, which means your relationships keep failing, but you blame external factors rather than recognizing your own deficiencies. I've seen marriages end, friendships implode, and families fracture because someone was too overconfident to admit they needed help. The tragedy is that these people often genuinely can't see the pattern. They think everyone else is the problem. Perhaps the scariest manifestation of the Dunning-Kruger effect is in decision-making during crises. When things go wrong, whether it's a medical emergency, a financial crisis, or a personal catastrophe, the worst thing you can have is someone who's confident but incompetent making critical decisions. History is littered with disasters caused by overconfident leaders who refuse to listen to experts. The financial crash of 2008, partly driven by executives who thought they understood complex derivatives better than they actually did. Medical malpractice cases often involve practitioners who were too confident to admit they needed help or additional training. The most dangerous person in a crisis isn't the one who admits they don't know. It's the one who's convinced they know everything while actually knowing very little. That's when incompetence doesn't just cause embarrassment, it causes catastrophe. So here's the million-dollar question. How do you actually escape the Dunning-Kruger trap and build genuine competence? The first step is embracing what I call productive discomfort, the willingness to deliberately put yourself in situations where your incompetence becomes impossible to ignore. This means seeking out feedback from people who actually know what they're doing, even when that feedback stings. It means taking on challenges that are slightly beyond your current abilities, where failure is a real possibility. Most people avoid this because it's uncomfortable, but that discomfort is exactly what you need. It's the friction that polishes rough edges. When you constantly put yourself in environments where you're the least knowledgeable person in the room, you develop what psychologists call accurate self-assessment. You can't maintain inflated confidence when reality keeps proving you wrong. The second critical piece is developing what I call deliberate practice with brutal honesty. This isn't just doing something over and over again. It's doing it with constant self-evaluation and expert feedback. A basketball player who shoots 1,000 free throws without correcting their form isn't developing competence. They're just reinforcing bad habits with confidence. Real improvement requires breaking skills down into components, identifying specific weaknesses, and systematically addressing them. This is where most people fail. They practice, sure, but they practice with their ego intact. They avoid the specific things they're bad at and focus on what they already do well because it feels better. But genuine competence requires you to be ruthlessly honest about where you suck and then spend most of your practice time on exactly those areas. It's not fun, but it's the only path to real skill. Here's something that'll transform how you approach learning. Build feedback loops in everything you do. Don't just rely on your own judgment about whether you're improving. Create objective measures and seek external validation. If you're learning to write, submit your work to editors and publications where it can be rejected. If you're developing business skills, track actual metrics and outcomes, not just your feelings about how well you're doing. If you're working on interpersonal skills, ask trusted friends for honest feedback about your blind spots. The key is making sure these feedback mechanisms are connected to reality, not just to your ego. This is why metacognition, thinking about your thinking, is so crucial. You need to develop the ability to step outside yourself and evaluate your own performance objectively. It's like having an internal coach who's more interested in your growth than in protecting your feelings. The final piece of building true competence is what I call strategic humility. This doesn't mean thinking you're terrible at everything. That's just the Dunning-Kruger effect in reverse. Strategic humility means accurately mapping your islands of expertise and your oceans of ignorance. You might be genuinely world-class in your specific domain while being a complete novice in others, and that's perfectly fine. The goal isn't to be an expert at everything. It's to know where you're competent and where you're not. This self-awareness allows you to speak with confidence when you actually know what you're talking about, and to shut up and listen when you don't. It means surrounding yourself with people whose strengths complement your weaknesses. It means being willing to say, "I don't know, but I'll find out," or "That's not my area of expertise. Let me connect you with someone who can actually help." Paradoxically, this kind of humility actually increases people's trust in you because they know that when you do speak confidently, it's backed by real knowledge rather than just bluster. Let me introduce you to one of the most useful concepts you'll ever learn: Mount Stupid. It's that early peak on the Dunning-Kruger curve where your confidence massively outstrips your actual competence. Imagine you're hiking, and you climb a small hill thinking you've conquered the mountain, not realizing that the real summit is still miles away, hidden by clouds. That's Mount Stupid, a dangerous vantage point where you feel on top of the world while actually standing on a tiny mound of dirt. The real question isn't whether you've ever been on Mount Stupid. We all have been, multiple times. The question is, can you recognize when you're standing on it right now? Because here's the brutal truth. The people on Mount Stupid never think they're on Mount Stupid. They think they're on the actual summit, which is precisely what makes it so dangerous. So how do you know if you're currently perched on this peak of overconfidence? Here's your first warning sign. You find yourself feeling frustrated that other people just don't get it. When you start thinking that everyone else is stupid or blind to the obvious truth that you've discovered, that's a massive red flag. Real experts in any field understand nuance and complexity. They know why intelligent people might disagree with them. But when you're on Mount Stupid, everything seems clear and simple. You've got all the answers, and anyone who disagrees must be an idiot, biased, or part of some conspiracy. This certainty feels empowering, but it's actually a symptom of insufficient knowledge. The more you learn about any complex topic, economics, psychology, history, science, the more you realize how much legitimate disagreement exists among actual experts. If you're not feeling that complexity, you haven't climbed high enough to see it yet. Another telltale sign you're on Mount Stupid. You're doing more talking than listening, more broadcasting than questioning. Pay attention to your conversation patterns. Are you genuinely curious about other people's perspectives, or are you just waiting for your turn to explain why you're right? Do you ask questions to learn, or to set up your own arguments? When someone with more experience offers a different viewpoint, do you consider it seriously, or do you immediately think of reasons why they're wrong? Here's a self-assessment exercise that's uncomfortable but incredibly valuable. Record yourself in a conversation or meeting where you're discussing something you think you understand well. Then listen back. How much airtime are you taking? How often do you say, "I don't know," versus making definitive statements? How receptive are you to alternative viewpoints? If you're monopolizing conversations and speaking in certainties, you're probably standing on that peak of overconfidence right now. The most reliable indicator that you're on Mount Stupid is this. You're convinced you've mastered something in a relatively short time. If you've been studying a subject for a few months and you think you've basically figured it out, congratulations. You're almost certainly wrong. Real expertise takes years of dedicated practice and study. When someone who's spent 2 decades in a field tells you it's more complicated than you think, they're probably right, and you're probably on Mount Stupid. This doesn't mean you can't learn quickly or that beginners shouldn't have confidence. It means you need to calibrate your confidence to your actual experience. A good rule of thumb: if your confidence is growing faster than your competence, something's wrong. The path down from Mount Stupid requires humility, patience, and the willingness to start over with what you think you know. It means treating your current understanding as a rough draft rather than a finished product, and being excited rather than threatened when you discover how much more there is to learn. So here's where we land. You now know something most people will never understand. That confidence and competence aren't the same thing, and your brain is actively working against you to blur that line. The real question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Because here's the thing, awareness is just the first step. You can walk away from this video, nod your head, think, yeah, that's interesting, and then go right back to operating on autopilot. Or you can actually use this. You can start questioning your own certainty, seeking out feedback that makes you uncomfortable, and building real skills instead of just collecting opinions. The choice is yours, but let me tell you, the people who take this seriously, who genuinely embrace intellectual humility and commit to continuous learning, those are the ones who end up running circles around everyone else in the long run. Now, if you found value in this video, here's how you can help us make more content like this. Hit that like button right now. Seriously, it takes half a second, and it tells YouTube that this kind of deep, philosophical content matters. Then subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're putting out videos every week that challenge conventional thinking and give you tools to navigate this complex world with more wisdom and less BS. We're not here to make you feel good. We're here to make you think better. And if that resonates with you, then you're exactly the kind of person we want in this community. The Dunning-Kruger effect is real, it's powerful, and it's probably affecting you right now in ways you can't see. But now you've got the map. You know the territory. The question is, are you brave enough to climb down from Mount Stupid and start the real journey toward genuine competence? Let me know in the comments what area of your life you think you might be overconfident in. I'll see you in the next one.